Well, hello everybody. Welcome to this episode of About Time with me, Chris Nichols. As you know, this is the series where I get to talk to people whose work I admire and who've inspired and influenced me over the years. And I'm delighted to say that today my guest is Jon Alexander. Jon, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Chris. It's an honour to be in that group of people.
Well, and you are, and I particularly love the book Citizens, but we can talk about that in a bit. And but you've done so much more than that. And I was wondering, given all the stuff you've done, I mean, how do you introduce yourself to people these days?
My Instagram handle is the Citizens Guy, so that's probably not a bad shorthand. But really, I introduce myself as a storyteller, as a writer. I'm increasingly playing with the language of a political theorist because I think that's sort of what I need to be right now.
Yeah.
Inhabiting that a bit more, and I do have affiliations with Manchester University and now with Harvard. So I think I'm beginning to be able to lay claim to that. But but yeah, so I think a political theorist. If Kate Raworth's an economist and Rutger Bregman's a historian, I'll decide that I'm a political theorist. How about that?
That's brilliant. Yeah. So what is the Harvard thing? Are you a visiting prof or something?
A visiting fellow, as of
Fantastic.
as
What
of about 3 days ago for this year.
brilliant. It sounds really exciting. Yeah. So well, we could go in lots of directions here, but I mean maybe the Citizens Guide thing is a good thing to do because I think you you had the new citizenship project for a long time and were doing brilliant work, and then decided to write a book, which I think we will make sure it's in the links to this so that people can find it if they don't know it. But maybe could we start there and just say something about that book, which has been really, I think, pivotal and as did you describe it as taking over your life in some ways?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all. I mean, all of the work I do, and I think all of the work I always do, will be rooted in this concept of what I call a citizen future and what I call the citizen story.
Mm.
And maybe just to set out less to talk about the book, and maybe just to put the kind of core set of ideas that I work with into this conversation that we can then jump
Yeah.
off wherever we might. Um, Really, my work rests on it's an offer of a way of seeing the moment in time we're living in, and I see this moment through the lens of what I call stories of self and society. And the argument I'm making basically is that easiest introduced as a historical shift. So end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th, we were in something like the subject story, and in the
Yeah.
subject story, the right thing to do is to keep your head down, do as you're told, on the basis that the God given few who run society know best and they'll lead us to the best outcomes. So subjects of the king, subjects of the queen, Queen Victoria, Britain in sort
Yeah.
of imperial
Yeah.
pomp. And that story kind of fell apart under the weight of its own contradictions. At the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th,
Mm.
Industrial Revolution, rise of the middle class, you just couldn't sustain a story that said that a God given few held power over the rest. And out of the two world wars, we more or less consciously, more or less deliberately, and I'll maybe come back to this in a bit more detail, but we constructed a
Mm.
new story and a new set of institutions to carry that story, and what I call the consumer story. And the consumer story says actually the right thing to do is to pursue self interest on the basis that that will add up to the collective interest. And what I believe is happening right now. So the Milton Friedman saying, famous thing of the social responsibility of businesses to maximize its profits, like that is a statement of consumer morality, of
Yeah.
the idea that self interest will add up to collective interest. That's how we should run society. And what I believe is happening right now is that the consumer story is collapsing.
Mhm.
And it's because it's collapsing because you can't face the challenge of our time from within the story that created them. You can't solve a crisis of loneliness and mental ill health from within a story that is fundamentally rooted in individualism, that says that we are independent, isolated individuals because the
Yeah.
story created the crisis. You can't solve crisis of inequality from within a story that rests on the idea that some are better than others, that we should have a kind of meritocracy, that those who are objectively better should rise to the top and hold power over the rest,
Mm.
because the story created the crisis. And you can't solve ecological crises from within a story that says that, you know, growth is the material standards of living, is the pursuit or is the goal, because again, that separation from nature, that the story created the crisis. The consumer story, we cannot solve the challenges of our time from within the logic that created them, and from within the institutions that have been created by that story as well. So a lot of my work now since the book came out has come to focus more and more on democracy and politics. And it's because I believe we're stuck in a consumer democracy where people's only agency is to choose between a fixed set of options, and where they're encouraged to make that choice from within their self-interest. That just can't
Yeah.
deliver solutions. And so in this moment, as the consumer story collapses, one thing that's happening is the subject story is back, right? Like there's the
Yeah.
strongman leader,
Big
there's the
time.
offer of
Yeah.
certainty.
Yeah.
But also, and this is where my work comes, is there is another possibility available. There is a bigger, deeper idea of who we are as humans that is available to us, which is what I mean by the citizen story. And so the citizen story says, actually, no, the right thing to do isn't just to keep your head down, nor is it to pursue self-interest. The right thing to do is to contribute your ideas and energy and resources, and to critically to reimagine and rebuild our institutions to tap into the ideas and energy and resources of everyone, because the logic that will get us to the best outcomes isn't a God-given few know best and they'll lead us. It isn't self-interest will aggregate. It's
Mm.
actually all of us are smarter than any of us, and it's by tapping into the collective energy, intelligence, wisdom, resource that you can face these challenges. And so I'm becoming in this time much more kind of uh, I think having much more of an edge to my work, basically, because what I'm saying to people and the places I'm getting invited into, um, European Parliament or big corporate spaces or whatever, I'm going in there to say, like, if you don't open these institutions up, if you don't reinvent them to be channels for the
Mm.
collective intelligence of humanity, then they are going to get torn down. Like
Yeah.
you will be torn apart.
That's interesting because my reaction listening to what you just said was, I wonder if this is sitting at all well with the corporate world, because, you know, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm blessed to work with some quite enlightened corporations and at least organizations, if not corporations, who approach strategy, for example, in a participative way. But still, my overriding sense of most large organizations is, to some extent, the divine right of kings still applies. Yeah.
As in capitalism rules and is here to stay
Well,
in its present
and
form.
well, and lots of organisations have elements of feudal baronry about it,
Right.
and you know you have tribes and you have chieftains and power groups around that, and you know I've seen a lot of lip service to participative strategy, and at the end of the day, I've seen a lot of, well, if you're not going to play our way, you're not a subject of this organisation. You know, and it's very much the old power dynamics of the subject story. So I'm delighted that the work is getting a hearing in big companies, because I think A, it's necessary, and B, it's really challenging for um, in the corporate world, and that's good, that's useful, or at least it has the potential to be useful. Yeah,
I think I mean, it is getting a hearing. To be honest, I'm steering more and more of my work towards formal politics,
yeah, hmm
and to the structures of democracy. And I think there, the and I think there it's very obvious what's going on, right? Like although even there it's resisted a great deal. And I think that the lure of I think so in democracy, and so we've also just launched a podcast called How to Save Democracy. Launched a
mm,
pilot season of 4 episodes. I'm co-hosting it with a Tunisian woman called Omazine Khalifa, who she was an activist in the Arab Spring and then became a politician herself in Tunisia, and so brings a fascinating viewpoint.
mm,
But what we're essentially exploring is the argument that actually these these institutions that we have today, that this whole framework that rests on the idea that that you can channel self-interest and make it add up to collective interest, that you can that everything should operate on the logic of a market, uh, simply can't work. And when particularly our politicians try to solve the challenges of our time from within that logic, try to compete with one another to serve us and meet our needs for us,
mm,
they're actually, no one believes it anymore.
mm.
And actually, as a result, all they're doing is pushing people into the arms of the rising fascism. Because because if you tell people enough times that you will fix it for them, uh, and you fail to, then someone who says, you know what, I will at least acknowledge that the system's broken, becomes much more appealing. But also, and this is like the one of the moments that I'm really I'm obsessing over right now, in the riots in the UK last summer, there was this moment
Yeah,
when, I don't know if you remember this, but on the Wednesday night after the first round of riots, there was a list of 100 places that the far right were going to attack was leaked on social media.
right.
And
Yeah,
every one of those places, at least 100 people and sometimes thousands turned out to protect them almost spontaneously. There was a bit of organizing, but not that much actually.
yeah,
And the next morning, like, I just saw that as this opening, because there are so many people in community organizations, in small businesses, in networks, and who are trying to build this kind of this participatory future, this rooted community future. And there are people in big businesses trying to do it too. And that was a moment when the sort of spirit in community expressed itself very
yeah,
powerfully. And in those times, like the opportunity for Starmer to lean into that, to open the door to that, to speak to it and say, like, the speech that he could have made that next morning, Thursday the 8th of August, almost a year ago to the day, could
right.
have been like, this is who we are. Like, this I've never been more proud to be British. This is how we do this work. Like, this is how we face our challenges. We all lean in together. Now let's turn that energy to bear on climate, on health, on and we'll put the machinery of government behind it. Like, that was there to be done. And
Mm,
instead what he did was he said, police and a strong hand has fixed this. Like, and in that moment he was basically that I guess what I'm saying is, it's not just that we have to. We need a different kind of leadership. I think maybe is the point that you and I can
yeah,
most fruitfully explore together. Like, the kind of leadership that was needed in that moment, that is needed in this moment, in broader terms, is a leadership that is prepared to acknowledge the scale of the challenges we face and be honest about them. I think,
mm,
and to celebrate the contribution that people are making, and to invite more of it, to hold challenges with people
mm,
rather than try and provide solutions for people, to hold questions with people rather than provide answers for them.
mm,
And I think that applies in corporate world as much as in political world, but
sure.
finding that kind of leadership and finding the bravery to step into that kind of leadership isn't easy. And I think it's, paradoxically, as we need that leadership more and more, it becomes more and more tempting, more and more beguiling for leaders to step into a kind of strong man, I will
Mm,
fix it mold.
yeah,
And I guess when I look out at the world right now, and the reason why I'm trying to write again, I think, and you can probably tell, I'm wrestling with this stuff at the moment, but I feel like we're grappling for something, that, like, there's a reason why this is why we're so stuck.
yeah. And just to say, John, I can feel the different energy in you in this call to our previous pop-up we did when you were first launching Citizens. There's definitely a different edge to you. I can't quite say what it is, but I can feel the difference. And as I'm listening, you're making me think about the group dynamics work of Wilfred Bion, which I know you know about, but for people who don't, I'll just say, Bion was a group psychotherapist who whose work was very influential on the Tavistock Institute. He was fascinated by why do large groups of people who are normally, quite sensible grown-up people sometimes do really absurd things like fall into dictatorships. And he looked at the conditions for when groups work well and when groups don't. And what he found is when the roles and identities and tasks of a group were clear, the group tended to work well. But as uncertainty rises and anxiety rises, groups tend to fall into what he called primitive patterns. And the primitive patterns are dependency, fight and flight, blaming, and so on. This is what I've made a career out of in group dynamics for many, many years, is helping people with high aspirations of sensible leadership and participative practice in organizations to sort out some of the stuff that happens when you invite groups to participate in things that make them anxious, because often it's much easier to abdicate and say, oh, I'll just leave it up to you so I can blame you later, which is
Mm.
often the form that Western democracy takes.
I mean, that sounds like a pretty good description of where we are right now, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and I guess some of what I'm wrestling is where does how do we break that? Like, how do
yeah.
we break that? Because at the moment it feels like so to bring another model in at the risk of over modeling this episode to the nth degree, Chris, but then it is you and me. Um, I've been playing a bit with the drama triangle.
Oh, yeah.
You know
Hmm.
the drama triangle, the cut and the Coutman.
I do. Yeah. Hmm.
And this idea of, so again, for those who don't, so imagine an equilateral triangle with the horizontal at the top, and the three poles are marked persecutor, rescuer, and victim. And the argument, as I understand it, and you maybe correct me if I get this wrong, Chris, but the argument is essentially that when relationships, which can be a individual, a sort of romantic relationship pattern, or a family, or a community, when they fall into a negative or destructive cycle, there tend to be folks occupying each of those three poles. And so one or some people step into a persecutor role where they occupy excessive agency, um, and sort of dictate the terms of what's going on. One or some people step into a place of diminished agency, the victim role, and start to sort of like being there to some degree because it absolves them of responsibility. And one or some people tend to enter this kind of rescuer role and try and
Yeah.
sort of do for the victim in the face of the persecutor. And I've been working with that as a model for where we are in our politics as well, and saying, like, actually our politicians to a large degree and have got stuck in this kind of persecutor space. Um, and we, the citizens, are often in that kind of victim space, and our media, our philanthropy, our NGOs, our campaigning organisations are in that kind of rescue thing, and so politics ends up happening between civil society organisations and politicians, with citizens sort of on the edges.
Yeah.
But what I've been finding really generative is there's some work on what's called the empowerment dynamic as a resolution of the drama triangle.
Hmm.
And they talk
Hmm.
at each of these three poles, there's work to be done. So they talk about a shift from persecutor to challenger, um, which is about sort of setting limits on the persecutor. How the persecutor's role, for sake of argument, the politician's role is to stop being invited, stop being attracted into excessive agency, and actually like name the challenge and the question rather than trying to provide or do it for. The victim's role, the shift for the victim is victim to creator, to actually claim agency, step into it, start to articulate and build what you want. And the rescuer shift is to rescuer to coach, is to not step into the agency that's offered to them, but to hold space and support and stand beside.
Yeah.
And it feels to me like that when I look around the world at the examples that I get excited by, whether that's, you know, the looking back 10 years to the founding of the Future Generations Commission in Wales,
Mhm.
and that there was a big national conversation called the Wales We Want that established
Mhm.
the sort of terms for that. Or I looked at Taiwan and the Gov Zero movement that was essentially a
Yeah,
group of citizens deciding what they wanted government to look like and creating parallel websites to government websites. Like I start to see these dynamics, those
yeah,
shifts happening,
yeah,
and that's like, that feels to me like maybe maybe the link is, as you talk about, like, are we clear about our roles? Like, do we? And I think in this, I think the one of the sort of tragedies of this moment, I think, is that we're facing these sort of enormous societal challenges, and yet we've got sort of less than 1% of the population really on the pitch in the face of them, and everyone else just being left as consumers, like,
yeah,
doing individual behavior change. When actually, I mean, there's a community, like the agency that's in community in collective acts, whether it's like community energy projects, community food, where it's like building parallel governments, like the chartism movements through history. Like, there's so much agency that we have when we start to act collectively. So yeah, again,
yeah,
I'm there's this sort of slightly frustrated energy to me at the moment, because I feel like I'm
yeah,
playing with ideas that are almost, I'm really trying to interrogate, like, why are we so stuck?
yeah. And I hear that, and good inquiry, good inquiry to have. And nobody really knows the answer to this right now, so it's a necessary inquiry. Um, uh, for me, the drama triangle and the Bion stuff sit really well together, and the the solution to both is kind of naming the game. Saying, well, this dance, this pattern, let's look at it. Let's just say what it is, and we can see it's never going to fix things. So let's have an honest conversation about where we are and what we can do and what we can't change, and then we can do something. And I experienced that in your work, and of course that has a history. We go back in a long way. I'm not talking about the deep history of it, but just like to the 80s and the 70s, where the whole field of participative action inquiry came about. And you and I were both trained um, through a master's degree in that tradition of, you know, the solution is participative, and often extended epistemologies are needed. We need to look through multiple windows. Just the language you use may be too small to do the job. We may need to use art. We may need to use theatre to find ways to have the conversations we need to have. But we certainly can't do it just by squeezing things through, a consumer lens, or let's leave it all to a politician lens. It's going to be too small.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great to know something about, because I'm sure people who know you may not know your background. I mean, you did the master's degree, but how on earth did you come to it? The master's degree with Peter Reason and Judy Marshall, the Bath program, Chris Seeley. Um, what made you do it?
I think the beginnings of some of these questions, but I, as a critic of of consumerism, which, as you know, for me is a word which has a capital C and a hyphen between the R and the ism, that and is a story of who we are, not just a sort of throwaway thing.
Yeah.
I started my career working in the advertising industry, so I spent 10 years actually as a strategist in the advertising industry, and my inquiry that led me to the masters was really asking deeper and deeper questions about what we're doing to ourselves when we tell ourselves we're consumers 3,000 odd times a day.
Yeah.
And that was my first boss framed my job to me by saying, what you've got to remember is the average consumer sees 3,000 commercial messages a day, and you have to cut through that. You have to make yours the best. And so for the first few years, I was like, make mine the best. I'll compete.
Yeah.
I'll be part. And
Yeah.
that's part of the story, right? That's part of the, like, if
Completely.
everyone competes to make theirs the best, then you rise the
Yeah.
tide for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. I do.
But
Do my background, almost childhood. I remember at school, in my late teens, coming across a book which you've probably read by Vance Packard called
yes,
Hidden Persuaders. and it like changed my world. I was thinking, oh my God, because I was doing mostly doing politics, and I read this book about advertising. I'm thinking, hang on, that's quite dark, and it got me interested in this stuff. Yeah, but
But yeah,
you
I
were
mean,
saying,
really,
yeah,
the journey to the masters was asking those questions, was
yeah,
saying and trying to work, basically, that I guess trying to work from within the logic of the story. So I'd started to see, uh, I'd acknowledged climate change. I'd acknowledged, and I'd tried to work from within the advertising industry to sell greener stuff, and to find ways to kind of be part of making a greener, fairer world. And then I realized, I guess, the sort of the kind of breakthrough moment for me, which was was going, "Oh, actually, no, like this whole story can't work." Like, there was a moment, and this sort of brought me to the masters, but then was my inquiry through the masters and ever since. That what brought me to the masters was going, I need a deeper take on sustainability, basically. And I was hunting for a way of something that could hold my inquiry into this. Like, how do I do my work in the world? How do I use what I'd already discovered were pretty punchy communication skills, uh, to contribute to the world I wanted to be part of? And that brought, and I came across this masters by chance. So I had a phone call where a recent graduate of it, Karina Gaffney, was
oh yeah,
trying to
yeah,
persuade me to come to an event, and I didn't go to the event, but I did sign up to the masters 2 weeks later after a 2 hour phone call. But out of the back of it, what that 2 year kind of, a week of intensive reflection every 3 months for 2 years, what that the space that held for me was to say, um, was to get me to a place of saying, well, actually, no, I don't think I can do this work from here. Um, and so I remember the kind of the critical breaking point for me was, I received what should have been a kind of dream brief, which was to do advertising for sustainable palm, to get people to look for sustainable palm oil for Unilever.
right,
And we came up with this campaign that I still believe would have been tremendously effective, which was we used images of the Greenpeace Unilever protests, the orangutans on the buildings,
yeah, yeah,
uh, and the line we used was, "This was our wake up call. This is yours." And so we were sort of validating activism in the name of a major corporation. We were sort of pointing to a challenge, and not pretending we had it sorted or anything like that. And these ads were tested. They went down really well in testing. Like, everyone said they thought differently about activism. They thought differently about Unilever. They would have looked for sustainable palm oil in products, and they encouraged them to engage more in environmentalism and da. And they went, and this was in Pullman years, and when Unilever were at the peak of their
yeah,
celebration as a kind of, and so I thought this was going to happen, and they went up the kind of the chain of command in Unilever and got killed, and what came back was a much cut budget, and a mandated press ad that had a beautiful image of the rainforest and the line, "What you buy in the supermarket can change the world."
mm,
And to me, that was this moment where I was like, oh, even the absolute best right now are going to are going to put messaging out that basically says, "Shush, little people, just go shopping." And that was the point where I was like, I have to do something different here. So, and what we, after a bit of a crisis, a personal crisis, what came out of that was starting the New Citizenship Project as a
yeah,
consultancy business, to work with organizations to say, okay, like, what if we come from a different story? What if we're inviting people into their agency as citizens, not just selling them stuff as consumers?
yeah,
And that also is what the book Citizens is, really, is an offer of a way of seeing, an offer of a way of seeing this moment, an offer of a way of seeing what organizations could do and be, that there isn't really any loss in. Like, I think I've shown with the case studies in Citizens, you can run a more flourishing business. But where I am
Mm.
now, and maybe this edge to my
Yeah.
voice and my work is really going, it's not enough. Like offering a better, a nicer kind of doesn't seem to be enough. We're trapped for some reason.
Mm.
Uh, and I'm and I can't making an offer isn't enough. There has to be, I feel like my voice is moving from kind of offer to demand
Mhm.
or something along those lines.
Yeah. And the trick is going to be to do that without shifting around the drama triangle and playing persecutor, which,
Right.
is easy for any of us to do in an activist role. It's to do that from a position of convener or steward or explainer or something, so that it it's not just a critical parent pointy finger kind of gesture.
Right.
I guess, yeah. Because there's enough of that around.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen, my friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
That's not, and you know that's not my energy as well, right? So it's like, how do we do this? Like, how do
yeah.
we?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it is that persecute. I think it is that challenger thing.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
because there's something in that, or maybe it's the coach role or some combination. But there's
Yeah.
part of what I want to. I feel
Mm.
like I want to say to humanity is we're so much better than this. We're
Yeah.
so
I
much
mean,
more than this.
I didn't for a moment want to
No,
label
no, I
you.
love the
No,
challenge.
no. What I do want to do is to share the, um, you know, we don't, you don't have to be bad people in any way to fall into the bion or the drama triangle patterns. Good work falls into these patterns, and that's part of the stuckness of it. And what I love in your energy, in the book, in the work since the book, in what you're talking about next, is the constant inquiry and the opening up of inquiry with others, which I think is at the heart of it, and doing that with a legitimacy of really credible platforms at a time when it's easier for things to be knocked back unless they've got a rigorous base. So having the Harvard link or other university links can help. Can you say something about the new book and the new podcast series? Because that sounds very exciting, and I knew nothing until I saw a very recent post on social media.
Yeah, I mean, this is all you and I are talking just just ahead of me trying to really lean into this.
Mm.
So I y- so yes, there's a new podcast series. We've created only 4 episodes as a taster at the moment, but the title is How to Save Democracy, and the inquiry is really like where is it, what's emerging and what's possible in this time, and how do we platform that and offer it, but also how do we challenge the existing. Like I'm so frustrated by the idea that in the UK right now the version of it is this your party, this new that and the line
Okay.
that Zara Sultana used the other day where she said the choice of the next election will be between socialism and barbarism, and I just feel like saying no, like how dare you, like that is not what's going on here. This is so much deeper a moment than that. Um, and so we're looking into kind of what happened in Taiwan and how they did their COVID response. We're looking into the role of art in democracy with Brian Eno.
Mm.
We've got a session on crowdsourcing constitutions with the woman who led the crowdsourcing of Mexico City's constitution and one of the guys who was behind the Icelandic constitutional crowdsourcing
Right.
experiment.
Okay. Mhm.
And so it's really the how to save democracy thing is my part of it, is it's my learning space. It's like what are the
Yeah.
conversations at the edges of what I know and what I've experienced to date and what I've heard to date to that are sort of research really. Who do I want to understand? Who do I want to talk to understand this with? A little bit like you're doing here.
Mm.
Um, and then the book is just started. I'm away at the moment. I've brain dumped 15,000 words of a book proposal because
Oh.
they were clearly weighing in my head from the last 2 years.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But it is what we've been talking about. It's I mean, there's three parts to it. Part of it is like how to face a polycrisis, like showing that the most successful approaches anywhere in the world have all been participatory,
Right.
to on any angle of the polycrisis. The second part is an interrogation of the kind of intellectual foundations of the consumer era, and I've
Hmm.
discovered that like GDP, the IQ test, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs all originate from within a 6 year period between
Right.
1937 and 1943, and carry with them GDP brings growth as a sort of as an idea of what society should aim for.
Yeah.
IQ tests bring meritocracy and the idea that some are better than others and should rule. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs embeds individualism. The maddest discovery I've made is that Maslow spent 6 weeks with the Blackfeet in southern Alberta in 1938 and basically ripped off their ideas and turned them into individualism from what for them was a fundamentally community driven framework. Their argument was you can't meet any needs with except through community actually. And then the final part of the book at the moment I'm playing with the drama triangle and saying and building it around these shifts from of politician from persecutor to challenger, of civil society from rescuer to coach, and most fundamentally a sort of challenge to us as citizens, to all of us, to move from victim to creator. Um,
Mm.
so that's the stuff I'm playing with at the moment. And I
Yeah.
yeah, as you say, I'm trying to build. I'll be the joy of the Harvard opportunity is I'll spend the next year with a kind of weekly connection with a group of people who are really at the Ash Center for Democratic Innovation at the Kennedy School, really interrogating the edges of new democratic practice, um, and I'll have the opportunity to speak to and work with those people as I develop this thinking. Um, I'm trying to back myself, really trying to, and not
Yeah.
back myself, but back the ideas and
Yeah.
trying to find the
I'm
right
with
way
you.
to put them into the world.
Yeah. Now, I have to bring in someone who can't be on this series, who I'd love to be on this series, and that's Chris Seeley. So I'm just wondering, what would Chris say to you at this point?
Oh, what a question. Um, I think well, one of the phrases that pops into my head is how do you hold it lightly?
Oh,
Um,
yeah. Uh-huh.
Chris always used to she always used to have this lovely encouragement to make sure that even in the most serious of work, and perhaps especially in the most serious of work, it's always playful.
Mm.
Um, so that feels like a helpful reminder. Um, I think she would also say, "Where are you in this?"
Yeah. For, for
And be
sure.
conscious
Yes.
of and
Yeah.
be conscious of that and acknowledge it. And I think there is something for me in my life right now
Mm.
of stepping into some maturity and losing some naivety. Um,
Mm.
but I think whenever I think of Chris, which I do often, I most fundamentally think about that joy, like the insistence that if we're to create a more joyful world, we have to have joy creating it.
Yeah. I think, you know, I think that's so spot on because it's it's so easy in this work and at this time to fall into despair and to think, well, God, nothing. It's so hard. Very little can be done. And yet, when I look at all the good work that's happening, whether it's you or Rob Hopkins or Donut Action Labs, it's participative and people have huge fun doing it. There has to be joy, and and Rob also talks about Ruth Bentovin and her Town Anywhere work, which is taking people into the future and building cardboard futures and then living in them. It's very much art, almost Blue Peter style, and it reminds me of Chris Seeley's phrase about artful knowing, which is it doesn't have to be good to be useful. You know, it can be really basic art as long as it's done with passion and you inquire into it. It's brilliant stuff. And I think there's some of that in here too, of not trying to get it right,
Mm, that's
but
nice.
but 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 making sure it's alive. It's got to be alive.
That reminds me of something Audrey Tang said to me as well. That former Taiwanese digital minister, who I've interviewed several times now, she had this thing like one of their sort of guiding principles was if you make something perfect, you kill it. Like
Yeah,
because there's nothing anyone can do to make it better or to mess with it. Um, I do have a thing though, like, and I'm trying to think what Chris would say on this, or I'd love your view. Like, I do think there's a need for this sort of the need for joy isn't necessarily in contradiction with the need for an edge,
Mhm.
for an insistence, for a determination. I do worry sometimes that we're a bit we can be a we can let ourselves down by being a bit naive.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe I'm
No,
talking about me there. Like I think
I
my
don't
voice has
think
been the
this.
voice of a Labrador.
Yeah, you've said that before. I remember you saying that before. I'm a Labrador, but I'm not experiencing that in you here. And I don't think there's a conflict at all between really serious inquiry into difficult stuff and joyfulness. Um, whether that's taking an appreciative framing to start with, or doing it in an artful, playful way, because it allows people to hold the anxiety of the situation long enough to go deep enough. Because otherwise, we would tend to jump straight out of it and never go deep. You know, and unless you can hold the anxiety, we go into a position of, well, let's adopt an easy answer. Then the strong man will do. We'll we'll blame somebody, and then it's not deep enough.
It's like I have this thing that what I think we're so hungry, and it's a big use
Mm.
of the word we, which is risky, but I think we're so
Mm.
hungry for someone to acknowledge, someone to say, no, this world, like we got some big problems. Like,
Yeah.
and if we get everyone involved and we do it and we set the challenges up, there are some amazing things going on, and we do stand a chance. Like
Yeah.
but we, what's the James Baldwin wisdom? Like nothing, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it's faced. It's like
Yeah.
it's that kind of we're just not we're not even we're not even being allowed on the pitch at the moment. And I
No.
think this idea that a party, I mean, I don't mean to, that I'm sure there are really valuable, good things in this thing. So I hesitate, I probably shouldn't pick on it so much, but I've just found the early days of this new political party with the Corbyn and Sultana thing so frustrating. Like the language, your party, like, are you kidding me? The kind of, the infantilism of that, like, it's the last thing we need is someone else to say, no, no, we'll do it for you. It's like there was a I read there was a yeah, I briefly was involved with the Liberal Democrats. I'm not anymore. I think they're deeply problematic as well. But there was a period in the 1970s, I believe, where the Liberal line was take power, vote Liberal, and I sort of think that's closer, right? It's like who's going to be the leader? Who are the leaders going to be who will say, we don't know how to get through this, but we do know we'll get through it best if we get everyone involved.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. John, we're very close to our 45 minutes, and I just want to ask you one final thing for of course we could talk about lots of things, but I'd just like to say, so you're going into this summer, you're going into your writing period. I mean, what what's next for you as you, or what's your next step?
Uh, my intention is to try and run this 15,000 words that just tumbled out of me past a few people,
Mm.
perhaps including your good self, Mr. Nichols, um, and then to see if I can get get a publisher who wants to work with me. And then I'm gonna be sprinting this autumn. I'm traveling and speaking an awful lot. Uh, and with some really exciting opportunities to learn along the way, from Dublin to Oslo to all sorts of spots. And I'll be in America a couple of times at Harvard. And then hopefully first half of next year is writing, alongside also putting together a full first season of this podcast with Omazine. So yeah, the How to Save Democracy, the podcast, the sort of live inquiry, is coming, and a book proposal is in the works, and a book, I hope. And if people want to join in with that journey, my website is jonalexander.net. There's a little an email sign up right at the bottom of the page, and I send fairly irregular, but generally I try to make them meaningful opportunities to challenge me and help me, and really be part of that work. So if anyone wants to be part of that, then I'd love to see them on
we
there.
we will make sure that we put a link to that into the notes along with this. Jon, let me just say thank you to our viewers, and I'll come back to say a proper thank you to you in just a moment. So everybody, 45 packed minutes, so we could have gone on for hours. Thank you for joining us. There are so many links between this and other episodes. The Rob Hopkins one, the Helena Clayton one on love, the Helen Sharona one, and others. I'll try to show some of the links I make, but it's an invitation really to dive into some of the episodes and make links for yourselves. There is some terrific work going on, including the work by you, Jon. So you are an inspiration. The energy you have and the ideas you spell out is just awesome. So I'm glad you're in the world, and I'm glad you were here today. So thanks very much for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
It's a pleasure. Go well. Go well with your busy autumn. Cheers, Jon.